I'm going to say hello to everyone. This is the Tennessee Native Plant Society's Native Plant Seminar Series. And our speaker tonight is going to be Randy Hedgepath. For the very few of you who may not know him, well, I'm sure it's very few because Randy gets around the state. Randy is a park ranger. He's started working in South Cumberland. He's been all over the state. Currently, he is our state naturalist. Very special position. And with that, he gets to spend time looking at flowers and all kinds of nature stuff. He gets to see everything from, oh gosh, all the mammals, the reptiles, the plants, the trees, the wildflowers, you name it, he gets to see it. And probably has. So he's going to tell us about, tonight he's going to tell us about some of his favorite wildflowers. And that for me would be a hard thing to narrow down to some. I'm sure it is for you too, Randy.
Yes.
So without further ado and without delay, I'm just going to say welcome, Randy. And I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go at it.
All righty. I hope I can smoothly go onto the share screen a little bit later. But good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I'm so flattered that I got asked to come and talk to you. As she said, I'm a naturalist, which means I'm not a scientist, not a botanist. So I usually tell people that naturalists know a little bit about a wide range of subjects, and a scientist knows a great deal about a very few subjects. So I'm in the naturalist class. I know a little bit about a lot of different things. And I don't claim to be a botanist by any means. So you're not going to learn probably new plants, but you may learn some folklore and some personal history of me and the plant in tonight's program. And if you have anything that I say that is not correct, please send me an email or a message, later on. I'm always glad to revise my understanding and correct information that may not be quite right. So I'm going to try to share screen now and go to my picture show. I'm going to show you pictures of plants and things and tell you things about them. Here we go. And I want to go back. Yeah, there we are. Okay, so you're looking at this and you can probably figure out that it's an aerial view of Burgess Falls near Cookeville, Tennessee. And it's in the snow and there's nothing in bloom that day. So what am I doing? Have I got the wrong program in? No. I start out this way, showing you before the growing season. It looked like, well, last weekend, it kind of looked like this. But very soon, well, let me go back. There was somebody from Arkansas. I spent a little time in the Missouri Ozarks. I worked for the Ozark National Scenic Riverways. This is the Falling Water River in the picture. I was on the Current and the Jacks Fork River over there. And we gave out information in our visitor center, these placemat things that had lots of information and a map. And it had a list of wildflowers on it. And there was, spring and a column of flowers, summer and a column, fall and a column. And then it had winter and one listed. So I went to the boss saying, I know I'm a seasonal, but I'll come back in the wintertime to see this unique flower that's only here in the wintertime. And he laughed. I said, what's so funny? He said, well, we put that on there, but it's not really a flower. It's an ice formation. They're called ice flowers. And in the wintertime, you see these. There's a plant called a wing stem that has a hollow stem and moisture inside of that on those first or subsequent nights when it's below freezing the entire night, that moisture in that stem crystallizes out the broken end of the stem or out the side. So even in the wintertime, you might think, no flowers out today, but there might be ice flowers out there. Well, let's get to some real flowers. Not too long after the snow is gone, the things start popping up through the brown and gray leaves, like these two. Once a couple of the early things in the spring. One of the earliest things is the harbinger of spring, sometimes called salt and pepper. Looks like it's been peppered. The white is the salt. This is a relative of the carrot, Umbelliferae family, I believe it is. And I just learned recently that, well, the foliage of the carrot is not a good thing to eat. It's a little toxic. And I was thinking that the harbinger of spring would probably be toxic too, but I read recently where the root, like the carrot's root, can be eaten or cooked and eaten. So this plant I've seen blooming really early. It's a harbinger of spring. It don't have to be spring for it to come out. It can be February. So I've seen it in Savage Gulf on February 20th. So one of the early things to come out. And this is one of my very favorites. It reminds me of the mountains. The slopes underneath the bluffs will sometimes have growths of this. It's called the Trailing Arbutus. I think it may be the only member of the Azalea family that is a vine. And it has these little clusters of white flowers underneath that are so fragrant. There was a guy in Beersheba Springs, Tennessee, who became a poet, Grundy County. Not many Grundy Countyans become poets, but Leonard Tate was one. And he wrote a poem in remembrance of his mother. And he called the poem Trailing Arbutus. And there's a line, or a couple of lines in there, quoting his mother. The lines are, "Please, son, I know it's that time of year. Can you go out and get the flowers of the arbutus and bring it in for me to smell so I can one more time before I go smell the most wonderful fragrance of our mountain." What a nice sentiment that is, for sure. So when you see Trailing Arbutus in the next few weeks, you might want to sniff it. And to sniff it, you have to get in a compromising position, usually prone on the ground. It's a very low-growing plant. Please don't pick it and pick it up to sniff it. Get on the ground on your belly. And here's a plant with a kind of a scary name. It's called bloodroot. And it has the flower come up first, and then the leaf comes up clasping around the stem, and you can see the sap over there. If you do a little digging around it and come up with one of the roots and cut it, it has a kind of an orange-red sap that drips out like blood. Wouldn't you want to rub that on your gums? Well, you would be better off if you did, because it has medicinal qualities that will cure things such as gingivitis. And it used to be in a mouthwash called Biodent. They eventually stopped using it and used the synthetic kind instead. But for a long time, Biodent had on the label, contains sanguinaria for gum health. Sanguinaria, the scientific name for this plant, refers to blood. I guess they didn't use bloodroot because they were afraid of the marketing dilemma of people not wanting to buy it because it had blood root in it. But I guess they had to write off their Spanish-speaking customers, with sanguine being referring to blood too. That might have kept them from buying the product. Oh, by the way, this is a terrible one to play the little game. If you're lovelorn and you pick one of these flowers and you're pulling off petals going, she loves me not, she loves me. Well, bloodroot is such a fragile flower that if you pull off one petal, they're all liable to fall off. And if you start with she loves me not, you're sunk. All right, here's a cute one. How about this? It's in the poppy family, just like the bloodroot. And it looks like a pair of pants that a Dutch boy would wear, hung on the clothesline. Dutchman's breeches. There's a good growth of this along the side of the old road at Radnor Lake that I always went out to see in the springtime. And Dutchman's breeches, probably not good to eat the foliage of this, but I have heard that other parts of it could be edible. And then it has a cousin, another member of the poppy family, called Squirrel Corn. I always thought it was because the flowers look like kernels of corn, but I hear that the roots actually have tooth-like growths on them that look like maybe some teeth. So squirrel corn, or I've related these to when I had teenagers or young ones along. I said, don't that look like hip hop pants, the low riders? Oh, and here's a tradition that I always observe. When these leaves come up through the forest floor, the leaf litter, the first speckled leaf I see in the spring is usually down on my property behind the pasture. And as soon as I see it, I eat it. They are delicious. One of my favorite wild edible plants, the Trout Lily, or I've heard it called fawn lily because it looks like the speckled back of a fawn. And we have 3 species of this in Tennessee. We have this one, it's called the yellow trout lily. And then we have a white one. And if you want to see the white one, my recommendation is to go to Cedars of Lebanon State Park and take the Cedar Forest Trail. There's a sinkhole on the backside of the ridge there that has a nice colony of these growing down in the sinkhole. And if you go to the Bluebell Island, which is a forest preserve or a wildflower preserve that I had a little bit of part in helping to save down near Mont Eagle at the base of the mountain on the Elk River, Bluebell Island has a growth of the white trout lilies as well. Spring beauties. These are popular with animals, grazing animals, but it's also a good edible for us too. You can use it as a trail nibble. You might want to carry some water to wash the dirt off because the tuber is the best part of this. So another name for the spring beauties is little tater. You dig it up, it's about the size of a dime and brown skin, white meat inside. And raw, they taste a little bit like a radish maybe, but you can cook them and make them more even flavored. I recognize these by the lines on the petals. Yeah, we have 2 varieties. We have the Carolina and what's the other one?
Virginia.
Virginia. Hey, am I forgetting Virginia? I'm talking about Virginia a lot earlier. The spring beauties. I've heard these pointed out as probably the most numerous blooming wildflower of North America. Now, who can determine that? I don't know. Somebody guessing, I guess. But when you enter Montgomery Bell State Park, where I have my office these days, from the Highway 70 entrance, there's a picnic area down to the right, grassy area with a picnic table beside a stream. And in the early spring, right about now, these flowers get as numerous as the blades of grass in that little picnic area. So I can believe that maybe it's the most numerous blooming wildflower. Oh, this is a shrub, and it comes out early. It's called I think it's the only institutionalized mispronunciation of a name I know of. Most people call it sarvisberry, but it's spelled S-E-R-V-I-C-E berry. And another name, shadbush. But in the springtime, early spring, late winter even, you can see these white flowers in the shrub layer of the forest as you drive along or walk along through the woods. Serviceberry refers maybe to blooming near the Easter service, I've heard. I've also heard a little bit of a more morbid thing where folks up north where the ground gets frozen hard as a rock cannot have funerals and burials until the ground thaws. So when you see this blooming, you know that you can go out and bury the relatives that have passed away during the winter. Okay. All right. Wild ginger. Now, I will admit, this is a staged photograph. You usually don't get to see the root exposed, which is the flavorful thing. You can use it just like the ginger you buy in the store, except this one is only half as big as a pencil. And the flower is usually laying on the ground. Its pollinators are walking insects. So I propped up the flower with a rock. I pull the leaves back out from around the root, and the leaf is there. So you can see all the three features of the wild ginger. One of my very favorites. The smell of the root is just wonderful. And this thing looks like it's wilted. Somebody forgot to water it, I guess. Huh? No, there's water droplets on there. See? This is Bellwort or Bellflower. And the most distinctive thing about this is edible, but the most distinctive thing is not the flower, but the leaves. This is called Perfoliate Bellflower. And you see the leaf is completely surrounding the stem of the plant. Perfoliate Bellwort. And when I was a college student, I had the fortune of getting an internship at Land Between the Lakes. And I led a lot of kids on nature walks. And I didn't know a lot about nature at that time. I was still learning. So walking around in the spring with these fifth graders from I think I talked to every fifth grader from Murfreesboro, but we saw a lot of these flowers along the way. So this I remember as being the first flower that I took a picture of. In my mind, I took a picture of it too, and went and got a field guide and looked it up and found it out. A flower that I learned from a book after seeing it in the woods, the fire pink or the catch fly. And I've had a debate with some folks about whether it's an insectivorous plant, but I think the consensus is usually no, it's not. It's just sticky, and bugs can walk down into the flower there and get caught, but they can usually free themselves and get away. And a lot of people, me included, were perplexed by the name pink. But the reason for that is pink means something besides the color. Instead of a light shade of red, pink also means cut. So if you look at the end of each petal, you see the cut, which is the pink. Pinking shears, you might have heard of. Cutting shears or pinking shears. Pink means cut. It meant that for hundreds of years before it was used as the light shade of red. This is one of my very favorites because I have that memory of learning it. I learned a lot of wildflowers from my grandfather when I was a kid because he would point them out in the cornfield and have me cut them down with a hoe. A lot of great wildflowers were weeds to Grandpa, and I learned several plants that way. Violets. Violets, the symbol of love. I think especially in Europe, because the common violet, I think, came from Europe, and it has heart-shaped leaves. So it's a symbol of true love. If somebody gives you a bouquet of violets and you don't care for that person, you may be in trouble because it is a symbol of love and they just did that. Oh, no, thank you, you meant to say. But to get kids to remember this one, oh, here's a kind of a hybrid I've heard, the common blue with some of the white on it. I've heard them called Confederate violets from afar. They look kind of gray, but I believe this is a hybrid. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here. And then roses are red and violets are blue is not always true. Here is a white one, the lance leaf violet. And this is a one that I've seen in Savage Gulf growing 2 feet tall. This is the Canada violet. And how do you remember violets? This is the way I do for kids to help them remember. you're looking at the flower there, you see there are 2 petals up, then there are 2 petals down, and then 1 in the middle. So this flower is a billboard for pollinators. It's trying to get them to come in. The 2 petals up are waving at them, hey, come on down. And the ones going sideways are saying, come on in, here's your eat it violets. And here's you a landing strip, the one in the middle. And as a matter of fact, the landing strip, those lines on there, I have read are a little bit warmer than the rest of the flower. So bugs that can see in the infrared, this is a neon billboard. And it's saying, eat it violets, eat it violets. Oh, roses are red and violets are blue. Some blue violets are delicious, full of vitamin A and C. Some white violets are good to eat too. But I've heard you eat the yellow violet and you'll get a stomach ache. They're not good to eat, probably a little toxic. Here's a plant that I think is misnamed quite terribly. It's called Rue Anemone. And the flowers look like anemone, but it's not anemone. And the leaves look like rue, but it's not a rue. So it's a liar, right? A more unique name that I've used is windflower, which is explained by the stem being very stiff and just your breath. Trying to take a picture of this, I learned that your breath, even if you're breathing normally, can make this plant just dance all over the place and be hard to get a picture of. So you had to hold your breath to get a picture of the Rue Anemone. Buttercup family. Here's a buttercup. Sounds wonderful, right? Buttercups like Reese's? No. Buttercups, as far as I know, most of them are pretty toxic. Oh, here's a plant that is coveted by a lot of folks. I know some places around Montgomery Bell where you can find the golden seal. It is a very useful medicinal plant, but it is threatened with overuse by people digging it up and selling it for those medicinal purposes, such as immune system boosting and what is it? Germicidal kind of thing. Golden seal. I'm not going to tell you where ours are located. That's the secret. Trilliums. What does that mean? Trillium means 3 of them. What's it got 3 of? Everything. There's 3 leaves, 3 petals, 3 sepals, 9 stamen, which is 3 times 3. There you go. This one is called the Prairie Trillium or recurvatum. The flowers there kind of recurve, or the sepals, I think, recurve down underneath the leaves. Prairie Trillium. That's the only trillium you will find if you're over in Memphis. Go around Shelby Forest and you can find this one, but none of the other trilliums. So it's a more widespread, I think. Prairie Trillium, probably because it goes further west in Memphis. But here at Montgomery Bell and Warner Park, other places on the Western Highland Rim, in West Tennessee, in Decatur County and Hardin County, down into Mississippi and Alabama, we have a unique trillium here called the Twisted Trillium. And when I purchased our home place here in Dixon County, I found out that there were a lot of trilliums growing on the bluff above the creek that makes one boundary of my property. And I was thrilled to see the trilliums there, but I didn't know what kind they were. I knew they were mottled leaf or toadshade or wake robin kind of trilliums, but it took until the next year for me to find out they were all twisted trilliums, and I got about 100 of them. That's great. I love the twisted trilliums. This is not one that you want to sniff. It smells pretty horrible, but unique to the Western Highland Rim, you might say. Twisted trillium. Here's the Southern red trillium, which is also called the wake robin. And this has a bad smell too. And you go down into the Savage Gulf, into the Collins Gulf area, and you can find these blooming there. But the whole mountainside seems to be covered with these Trillium grandiflora. And then there's this one, which is kind of not like the others. If you see all the trilliums pictured together, this one will have a different habitat than just about all the others. I found it growing the first time at Franklin State Forest on top of the Cumberland Plateau in a kind of a dry area, dry habitat, which I didn't remember any other trilliums growing there. And I'd never seen this anywhere else except there at Franklin State Forest. So I called my friend up, the state botanist, and I said, Todd, guess what? And he says, what? I found a trillium that I haven't seen anywhere else. It's probably a rare species, huh? And he goes, well, maybe. What is it? I said, as far as I can determine, it's a Catesby's trillium. Period of silence. And he says, why do you think that's rare? I said, well, I've never seen it anywhere except at Franklin State Forest. That's kind of a restricted range, right? Period of silence. And he comes back and says, Randy, you don't go hiking much in Alabama and Georgia, do you? No, I don't. Well, if you did, you would find out that Catesby's trillium is pretty common down there. So we just have a little bit of the edge of their range coming up into Tennessee. And I think they also grow in Cades Cove and areas over in the Smoky Mountains. Here's a plant with two extreme names. How about if it grows next to your barn or your livestock eat this, they will get covered with lice. So it's called lousewort. Or it is the most divine plant. It grows on the side of the Mount Olympus. It's the thing that the gods eat. It's called the woods betony. Well, take your choice. Either food of the gods or a harbor for lice. Yes. One of my favorites. In the Ozarks, there was a different colored species, which I don't remember if it's a different species or just a variation. But it looks like a little fern. And a good place to see this, if you go down to Manchester and walk the enclosure trail around the top of the ridge there on the southeastern side of the peninsula, there's a lot of this growing beside the trail. And I hear that this has a specific relationship with a fungus in the soil that very hard to get this to grow transplanting it, or you're disturbing its relationship. Here we go, the bluebells. This is a shot from the Bluebell Island. Bluebell Martensia, one of my favorites, and I was thrilled to find bluebells growing on the side of my property here in Dixon County. It, I think, is the epitome of the spring ephemeral. It is a plant that comes up as soon as it can in the spring without getting frozen. And then by the middle of April or the last of April, it's turned yellow and gone away. So a month a year, all it has to do is work for 1 month a year. Sounds like a great job. Bluebells. And here is purple Facilia. My background shot here is a whole bunch of the purple Facilia. It seems to be able to grow where there's no soil, just leaf litter. It can grow. And I've heard people complain about the smell. It has a rather unpleasant aroma. Some people say it smells like a baby diaper, one that's full, one that's been in the hamper for 2 weeks. Well, I don't think it's that bad, but it is purple Facilia. And I learned a very important lesson. When I was a rookie ranger, I went to Collins Gulf and I saw this site that I got a picture of behind me here. And I thought to myself, oh, this is where I need to lead a hike next spring. So next spring came. I advertised a hike. I had a bunch of people show up. We walked down in there and there was not a single Facilia anywhere in sight. I was perplexed. And I went back and tried to find out what was going on. If I had just read a little bit closer in the field guide, and noticed the word biennial, I would have known that I should delay my hike down into Collins Gulf to see the Facilia until the next year, every other year. And us, you can see these probably in different places. They're not all coordinated with the same 2-year rotation. I think the ones in the South Chickamauga or the North Chickamauga Creek area of the Cumberland Trail bloom on a different rotation than the Collins Gulf. But let me see, was it last year they bloomed or is it this coming year? I can never remember that. But the purple Facilia, also called scorpion weed because it starts out with the flowers kind of unfurling like a scorpion's tail. I like Facilia better. And here's a restricted range too, that I learned before I got perplexed by it. Blue-eyed Mary, there's only a couple of counties in Tennessee that have this, Sumner County and Clay County. I've seen it up in Sumner County because there's a wonderful Nature Conservancy preserve there that has a lot of it. But if you go to Pennsylvania or points north, it is quite abundant. And I found out that this was a plant that you could see at Edgar Evans State Park on Center Hill Lake. So I went to my friend Holly, who is now my assistant, and I asked her, how can you see the Western wallflower? She said, well, you have to go out and look around the bluffs, which is kind of difficult because they're usually over the water. Oh, well, the park have a boat? And I could see almost the idea. Mark, her husband, were there too. And they said, a boat trip to see wildflowers. What a great idea. So every year now in late May, if you tune into the program schedule for Edgar Evans State Park, they have boat tours, pontoon boat trips around the lakeshore along the bluffs of Center Hill Lake to see the Western wallflower. It grows on the wall. Delphinium, a very poisonous, although very beautiful plant. I worked for 9 years at Radnor Lake, and it seemed there were hollows with nothing but Delphinium there, purple larkspur, dwarf larkspur. And Radnor Lake has a lot of this, and it has a lot of deer. But the deer know not to eat this. It's not good. It is toxic. Delphinium, what does that mean? Well, it means dolphin-like. Are you having trouble seeing dolphin-like in the flowers here? How about now? Yeah, there you go. A diving dolphin, Delphinium. Beautiful, but toxic. And cedar glades. I mean, what can you say? Cedar glades are one of the most unique natural habitats in North America. And we have some of the best ones in Middle Tennessee, Wilson, Rutherford, and Davidson County. 20-something endemic species that grow nowhere else except in cedar glades, like the Nashville breadroot here, a legume family member that is beautiful color. Not too long until you can see it out in the cedar glades. And in the glades, you can also see the only native cactus to Tennessee, the opuntia, or the prickly pear. And there's a pollinator at work. Look at that picture. See the pollinator doing its job there. And I love these. I found these growing at South Cumberland on a sandstone, I thought. And then I found out that it's kind of endemic for the cedar glades as well. But they're different species. There's one that grows on limestone, one that grows on, or two, I think, that grows on sandstone. Fame flower, F-A-M-E, fame. And this, the first plant that was put on the endangered species list from Tennessee was this, Tennesseeensis, the Tennessee coneflower. I got to know Dr. Elsie Quarterman, and she told me that she thought this was extinct. A lot of people thought it was extinct. They thought it was extinct for 30, 40 years. She said she was driving into Cedars of Lebanon one day to go do some research in a cedar glade and almost wrecked her car because she looked over on the side of the road and there was a plant she had only seen in books, this Tennessee coneflower. So being a good botanist, she jumped out of her car and ran out there, saw that the glade was just covered with them. So she pulled up about half a dozen and pressed them for specimens to say, hey, these are still around. And the rangers were surprised by her joy at seeing these because they'd been seeing them for years. But Tennessee coneflower, the other coneflower, the petals kind of flex down. On the Tennessee coneflower with the hairy leaves, they flex up. One of the most beautiful flowers. I've heard somebody say, Tennessee coneflower, that ought to be the state flower. Well, it would be a great one if you live in Rutherford, Wilson, and Davidson County, but everybody else in the state might have a problem with it. Yeah, Tennessee coneflower. It's worth a trip to the Cedar Glades in June to see them in full bloom. So our state flower, not the Tennessee coneflower. Well, iris, yeah, I think the actual Tennessee state flower is kind of a garden iris. This is dwarf crested iris, I believe. But iris, it's only our state flower. I heard that it was because a campaign by the Iris Bulb Growers Association in the 1930s were pushing for the iris to be adopted as our state flower to sell more bulbs. Well, you know, economic interest. Iris is a great flower. Don't get me wrong. I love iris. Here's one that you might not know about. You have to go to far western Tennessee along the Mississippi River. And to see this, you usually have to just scan the side ditches of the road. Copper iris along the Mississippi for you West Tennessee folks. And if you look real carefully in this picture, this is a picture that I did not take. I borrowed this from my friend David Haggard over there at Reelfoot Lake. There's a hummingbird there to the upper left on those flowers, taking advantage of the copper iris. So what was our state flower before the Bulb Growers Association pushed the iris through? Well, this was. And now we call it our Tennessee state wildflower, the passion flower. My grandpa called it the maypop because it grew in the corn and I had to hoe it down. And it had a fruit on it, kind of the size of a ping pong ball. And you could squeeze it and it may or may not go. So the maypop or the apricot vine. And it has two beautiful butterflies that depend on it as their caterpillar source of food. The Gulf Fritillary, one of the most beautiful, I think, butterflies of our area depend on this plant. Passion flower, you might have not know that the early Jesuits, I think it was, saw this plant and when the botanist brought it in and saw the symbolism of the passion play of Christ. You got the three nails, you got a line of blood around the bottom there dripping from the nails, and the petals around are the crown of thorns. So seeing all that, they declared it the passion flower. Thinking of state things, what about our state tree? Our state tree has a wonderful flower too. Tallest growing living thing in Eastern North America. Member of the magnolia family, not a poplar at all, but it is a great state tree in my opinion. That big, terrible picture of the flower there. They're much more beautiful than that. But this is a picture that I borrowed from somebody. The tulip poplar, our Tennessee state tree. The only other liriodendron that I've heard in the world is in China. So how do we have a liriodendron here and one in China? Apparently, they may have evolved from a common ancestor back when the continents were closer, even connected together. Now here's another magnolia. Big flower, sometimes 12 to 14 inches across, I've heard. This is the umbrella tree magnolia. It looks exotic. When you're walking around Fall Creek Falls, if you go down on the Pawpaw Trail and take the bridge across Rock House Creek, there's some right above your head there. And you look up and see those big leaves and it looks really exotic. Well, I wanted to tell my Bertha Creesburg story. She told me that when she was a young naturalist, she had a job at a summer camp in North Carolina. And she had gotten her campers to bed, and she thought she was going to have a nice steam releasing swim in the lake. So she goes down to the lake in the dark, take her clothes off, goes into the lake, swimming around. When she comes back out, her clothes are gone. She said she was perplexed for a minute, but she looked around and saw these big magnolia leaves. And then she found a little vine nearby. So the people the campers that had stolen her clothes were waiting back at camp. And when she walked into camp, all the lights came on, and there was Bertha standing there completely clothed in magnolia leaves, saved by the magnolia. Oh, the ladies, they're acting a little shy here. We're getting into the orchids family now. This is one that I fell in love with when I was at South Cumberland because it grew so commonly around the coniferous forest under the hemlock trees or the pines. Yeah, when they get open, the pink lady slipper. And I think this plant can take revenge on those folks that dare to dig it up and try to transplant it. Well, it'll die. And it'll get you too. I've heard that the leaf can cause dermatitis like poison ivy. So there, take that. And different lady slippers and under the oaks and hickories of Lost Cove, close to where I used to live at South Cumberland, I would find the yellow lady slipper. And other orchids, the yellow fringed orchid we had at the visitor center at South Cumberland, growing underneath the power line. Yellow fringed orchid, I've heard it called. I always called it the orange sherbet orchid. And then I got my name in the annals of the natural areas or the natural heritage part of our department by reporting the location of the one on the right there, the white fringeless orchid, Plantanthera integralabia. And here is one of the most common orchids in Tennessee, the Coneflower orchid, which this time of year, this is what you see. A leaf that looks like seersucker fabric. You turn it over and it's deep purple on the bottom. I hear the purple may be some sort of chemical that helps it keep from freezing. It and its relative that looks like pinstripe pants, the Putty Root, are orchid species that apparently are specialists in a hardwood forest because they only have leaves in the fall, spring, and winter when the sunshine can get down through the forest canopy and they get a little bit of sun. In the summertime, the leaves are gone and the flowers come up. Coneflower orchid. Speaking of the plateau, here is one of my favorite ones on the plateau trails. Wild honeysuckle, the people there in Grundy County called it, but of course it's wild azalea. Wonderful fragrance that you can smell without even having to go over and sniff the flower. And other azalea family members, mountain laurel. I had a maintenance man at Stone Door that told me his names for plants. I was fascinated. He got to the 8th grade, but he had a name for every plant in the forest. So I always asked him, what do you call this? And I would hear his name and that would make sense to me. And then one day I said, this is mountain laurel. What do you call this? He said, well, we call it mountain laurel, of course. Really? I said, do you know that the leaves are poisonous? He goes, oh yeah, but we used to feed it to our hogs. So I was kind of taken aback. Why would you do that, Preston? He said, well, we just feed them a little bit, see what would happen. When they started staggering around and acting real drunk, we knew we'd fed them enough. That's really weird, Preston. Why are you doing that to your poor hogs? Well, we had to do it because they weren't gaining any weight. And if you feed these leaves to them, that'll kill them worms inside and your pigs can get fat. The old time hogwormer. Of course, this is not very safe. You occasionally lost hogs with this kind of worming, but it is a way that they used to do that. The rhododendron coming up in June. Somebody requested yesterday, somebody requested me leading them up to the top of the Roan Mountain, where there's another kind of rhododendron. This one is maximum, I believe. One of the easiest scientific names to know. The scientific name for the biggest rhododendron is Rhododendron maximum. And you find this along streams in the lower elevations. And then you go up to the top, and the Catabiense, or the Catawba rhododendron covering the mountaintop, is one of the most spectacular things. Some people have asked me, can you do a top 10 list of nature experiences in Tennessee? And always included in that is go to the top of Roan Mountain in late June and see this in full bloom over the top of the mountain. It is spectacular. Here's an azalea that has very little smell. It doesn't need a whole lot of smell. I think it attracts its pollinators with this intense color, the flame azalea. And you can find this in balls on the top of the Rhone and down into the Smokies as well. This one, though, has a definite aroma. I love to show this to kids. And I say, look at this, it's maple leaf viburnum. And it smells kind of funny. And I have them sniff it, and they usually describe it as, whoa, that smells like dirty socks. Yeah, sometimes pollinators are attracted to the foul smells like this one. Milkweeds. The monarch butterfly depends on the milkweeds. And this is my favorite. A lot of people prefer this one too. The butterfly weed, it's called. The orange flowers. And here's the regular coneflower. See the petals kind of hanging down underneath the cone? That's the regular purple coneflower, echinacea. And a lily family member that, if you look really closely in the middle of the picture there, the flower is hanging down underneath that upper whorl of leaves. It looks like a little spider almost. This is called the Indian cucumber root. And the little white tuber on this is my favorite wild edible plant. It is delicious, crunchy, sweet. Don't dig them on the natural area, but they grow all over the state. I found them over in West Tennessee at Natchez Trace State Park as well. And here's one of my favorites. It's so cute, you know. You lift the lid, there's Jack standing in his pulpit, a Jack in the pulpit. And this is a different view of the same species. Oh, here's I think a different species of the Jack in the pulpit. And here is where I usually stop and talk about my friend and mentor, Mac Pritchard. Y'all heard this story of how Mac discovered a different name for this? Well, I'm going to tell it to you anyway. He told me that he had a program for Garden Club maybe in Chattanooga, and he was on his way down there, and he had all day to get there. So he stopped in Tracy City and went for a walk on the Fiery Gizzard. And before long, he looked at his watch and realized, oh man, I've used up all my time. I got to get out of here quick. So he climbed up the side of the mountain instead of taking the trail out, trying to cut across, had a shortcut. And he got to the top of the mountain thinking that he would come out on a road, but he came out in a backyard. And there was a lady sitting on the porch. And as soon as he came out of the forest in his uniform, she stood up and yelled at him, "Wait, what are you doing?" He said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry to trespass, but I'm trying to get to Langford Road. Can I go across your yard to get over there?" "What are you doing out there in them woods?" she asked. "Well, ma'am, I'm a naturalist. I'm studying plants. I was studying plants." "Is that so? Well, have you ever heard of an Indian turnip?" And Mac thought for a minute, and he said, "No, I don't believe I remember that name. But can I go across your yard?" She said, "Yeah, I guess you can. But think about it. There's an Indian turnip growing right beside you down there." And he looked down and saw the Jack in the pulpit and said, "Oh, well, ma'am, I always call this Jack in the pulpit." "Oh," the lady said, and she kind of smiled and sat back down. "Well, it's also called Indian turnip because you can eat the root." And he thought to himself, well, really? And curiosity got the best of him. He said, "Can I dig this one up here and see the root that you eat?" She said, "Yeah, go ahead." So he dug it up and he knocked the dirt off of it and he held it up and said, you can eat this?" And she leaned forward and said, "Yeah." He should have known better, but he bit into it. Instantly, he felt like his mouth had been set on fire. He was very much in pain, and spitting, trying to get it out. And he looks over, and there's one of those outdoor spigots, and he went over there, and he turns on the spigot and makes the worst mistake of the evening, because water activates the crystals and causes it to be even worse pain. So he's in terrible pain, and he notices the lady rocking on the porch, laughing her head off, and he's thinking, well, maybe I won't make it to Chattanooga because I might kill this woman. I better not do that. So he gets to where he can talk, and he finally says, ma'am, why did you do that? And she said to him, well, young fella, if you hadn't been in such a hurry, I'd have told you had to cook it first. I think you have to do more than cook it, actually, to get the oxalate crystals out of it. So Indian turnip is kind of a false claim, I think. So let's go into the fall. Yeah. One of my very favorites, the ironweed, grows 8-10 feet tall, beautiful purple color. And it's called that ironweed because of the root being so hard, it's like iron. And then Joe Pye weed even grows taller. And Joe Pye, I've heard that it's maybe mispronunciation of an Indian name for it that would refer to the medicinal qualities. Fever reducer and many other things are attributed to the Joe Pye weed. So you find the ironwood on the right, and the Joe Pye weed on the left, growing in wet spots in August and September. And that's where you find the goldenrod blooming too, which is falsely accused of being the culprit in the hay fever horror that a lot of people have to go through in August and September. Yeah, the goldenrod is beautiful, don't you think? Well, it's trying to attract pollinators by its beauty. But growing and blooming at the very same time as this beautiful flower is a flower that has very little beauty to it. It is actually wind pollinated, and the pollen falls out in great quantities and blows around in the breeze and up into your nose and causes you to be miserable. So blooming at the same time as the goldenrod is ragweed. Who's the real culprit in the hay fever war? One of my very favorite fruits, the Meadow Beauties, around ponds or in the other wet places, an edible plant you can eat. The leaves are kind of sweet, but the fruit, look at that, it looks like little urns. Meadow Beauty, you can find two different species of this. There's the Maryland and the Virginia Meadow Beauty. This one I think is the Virginia, which is a better color. The Maryland is a little bit pale, almost white. And a fall aster, of course. I think this is a New England aster. I see a couple of leaves back there that are clasping around the stem that tells you that it's a New England aster. I had a friend named Fran Wallace, who was a good friend. She's passed away now. She had an accident. But she and her friends came on my hikes when I was down at South Cumberland. And they grew to love hiking so much, they formed their own little hiking club. And they called themselves the Fall Asters. So I said, oh, how cute. Why do you call yourself the Fall Asters? She said, well, we all started hiking late in life, so we're all late bloomers, just like the Fall Asters. Yes, symbol of the fall, the asters. Also a symbol of the fall, the lobelias. And I love the blue lobelias, the great blue and the spike lobelia. But my favorite wildflower of them all is a lobelia with this color. It's almost too red to believe. Cardinal Flower. One of my favorite books I have is Wildflower Folklore by Laura Sue Martin. And she said that the cardinal flower, she has been told, could be an ingredient in a love potion, especially useful for older women. I think who told her that was probably an older man trying to get rid of women. Yeah, because this is very toxic. If you make a love potion out of this, you're probably going to kill somebody. But what a color, huh? Cardinal flower. That's my favorite of all of my favorites that I've shown you tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. All right.
All right. That was delightful, Randy.
Well, thank
and
you.
that cardinal flower, I have to tell you, when I still lived in Maryland, I was growing it in my backyard. And honest, I think the hummingbirds got in line for it. One would be feeding on it, and there'd be two more, three more lined up, waiting a turn to get to that cardinal flower. They just absolutely love it.
Yeah, you look for the cardinal flowers in wet places, places where standing water would be in the springtime is the most likely spot for your cardinal flowers. There's some at Foster Falls down at South Cumberland. It's a pretty common plant, actually. But
it is.
Every time I see it, I get a thrill. Love that cardinal.
It's so striking. That, and it's so tall, that also adds to it. The height of the plant kind of catches you off guard.
All right. Is there any other comments or questions from anyone?
We have a few questions in the chat. Let me see. Bettina, will you help me with this?
Yeah.
Usually Bettina and I will take turns asking questions from the chat.
They're not all questions, I don't think.
No, a lot of them are comments about where they're at.
Somebody asked the name of the folklore book again.
It's called Wildflower Folklore by Laura Sue Martin. Look on my shelf here, see if it's handy. I will show you. Well, can't do that because I'm on the background. But Laura Sue Martin, Wildflower Folklore. Got a lot of little trivia about flowers.
When would the white trout lilies be blooming at Cedars of Lebanon?
Pretty early. I'd say you need to go now or in the next week or two because it is a real early bloomer. I usually go too late. If you wait until April, you're not going to see it. Probably the third week in March here, which is what, next week? That would be a good time.
Are they found all over Tennessee or just in certain regions?
Oh gosh, I can't tell you that. I don't know, but I know they're near Maud Eagle on Bluebell Island, and they are at Cedars of Lebanon. And we did have some, my friend John Froschauer went to approve an area for a bicycle trail at Long Hunter State Park. And he said there were a whole bunch of them out there on a place called Bald Knob near Percy Priest Lake in Long Hunter State Park. So that's another place you can go see them.
Okay.
And there was another question. What was the name of the scorpion weed? That's the purple Facilia, right?
Yes, it's a Facilia, Phacelia. That particular species, I think, is Bipinnatifida.
Yeah.
Double compound. Yeah.
And
I've seen that all over the place. I mean, it's not just at South Cumberland, but it's at Edgar Evans and Middle Tennessee, around Nashville as well. So it can be found a lot of different places.
It's in the same, it's now been placed in the same family as the bluebells. And that scorpion, the Boraginaceae, which is the bluebell family, a lot of them have that scorpion flower shape. Yeah, flower head shape.
Okay. The comment is on the white trout lilies. They're blooming right now. Also good stand on the MTB trail at Long Hunter State Park.
Right.
So.
Oh gosh, doing a moss hike. I don't know a lot about moss, but that's a subject that I would like to learn more about. So maybe I can work up one.
And then someone says, what was that blue flower you showed at Cedars of Lebanon? That was the Nashville breadroot, right?
From the Cedar Glades, yes.
Purple. Purple. Yeah, it's a pea. It's in the pea family.
Yes, a legume. Yeah, it's pretty common in the Cedar Glades. You go to any Cedar Glade around the 3-county area, and you're probably going to find the Nashville breadroot, one of the more common Cedar Glade plants.
One comment is that there's a beautiful display of blue-eyed Mary at Reflection Riding in Chattanooga.
Oh. Yes, I read about that. It's I think it's just junk there because somebody probably brought it in and let it start growing. So it's kind of escaped wild there.
It's all over Illinois.
Yeah, it is pretty common, I hear, further north.
Another comment for that area is Audubon Acres in Chattanooga used to have blue-eyed Mary too, but they think it's been destroyed.
Mm.
So I don't know.
Oh, and here's a good question. What wildflower books would you recommend?
Tennessee Wildflowers of the Ohio Valley and Southern Appalachians. I have found this book to be the most useful wildflower guide that I've ever seen. When I was at South Cumberland, it wasn't available, of course. So I used the Wildflowers of Kentucky. And the Wildflowers of Kentucky and the Wildflowers of Georgia, a yellow book, were pretty useful, but it talked about locations in those states instead of Tennessee. And it was a long wait to get a Tennessee book, but we got a good one now.
Yeah, and it's available. It's available from the TNPS, and it's also on Amazon. But TNPS gives you a little bit of a discount.
And
it's
I think
also available in bookstores and many of the park bookstores.
The park gift shops.
Gift shops.
Especially at Fall Creek Falls. If you look through the books at Fall Creek Falls, there will be one in there.
And in that book, be sure you read the little comments, because you don't need to be you can just learn about the wildflowers, and the comments are really nice to read, practically a pre-taste of the stories that Randy has.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, to prepare for the program tonight, I read a lot of those.
And for those who don't know it, the lead author of that book is one of our viewers tonight.
Indeed.
Dennis Horn was I'm not sure if he's still with us, but he was on earlier, and yes, I think he still is.
Yeah, I'm still here, and also I wanted to mention that those notes, those little fun things that are in the book, a lot of those, most all of those were done by my co-editor, Tavia Cathcart. She that was her main contribution to the book, and it was a good one.
Indeed.
Tavia is now running a nature preserve in Kentucky, and that is her dream, was her dream job, and Tracy Mahan preserve, and I'm still friends with her, and but anyway, she is following the dream of having a nature preserve. And
hey, I see a question that says, where do you see Twisted Trillium? I can answer that one. The trails here at Montgomery Bell State Park are it's a good place to see that. Also, the hiking trail, horse trail along the side of the Natchez Trace Parkway is also a good place to see the Twisted Trillium. So on the Western Highland Rim, there are several good places. Even at Warner Parks, the Warner Parks have some too.
And anyone who is studying the wildflowers more in depth, go by the scientific name. If you can't remember it right away, they all fit together, as the common names don't fit together. So they don't fit together. So this and the scientific names are all over the world the same. So I can look up in any book, language, or painting, or whatever. And so start with Taraxacum officinale, the dandelion. Use that as a base, Taraxacum officinale, and it literally says what it is. And when Randy was saying the common names, it sometimes got me over the loop, because I'm supposed to know the scientific names just like that. And, so it kind of, but, and also with the species, with the one, the little dentaria here that so it all, all fits together. If anyone is a member of the Georgia Botanical Society and their great trillium books around, and just recently in their magazine from last Tipularia magazine, they reprinted a Trillium article by Tom Patrick, who is deceased now. But so this way you can delve into the depths of the botany.
Okay. One last question is, do you or the state natural areas post on Facebook where people might see things blooming at a given time in the various parks and natural areas?
No, that's a great idea, and I'd like to see that, but it doesn't presently exist. You kind of have to go by the field guide and see when it's going to bloom, and trust your judgment on that.
There is a Facebook site called What's Blooming Now in Tennessee.
Ah, great.
That is a great resource of, people post pictures at the time they're blooming, and
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Great.
We also have our Wildflower Hikes. I'll put in a plug for Bart and all the work he's done to help schedule these hikes. We've got about 13 hikes this year. Yeah. And they are to see plants that are blooming, so in places that they're blooming. So that's a big help for folks. If you just want to get in on one of our hikes, you will see blooming wildflowers.
I've got lots of them planned for myself as well. Norris Dam and
I'm sure.
Old Stone Fort and South Cumberland I've got coming up.
Randy, you mentioned that yellow trout lily is edible. Is that the corm or the tuber, or what part of
it's the leaf that I eat, okay. And it's before the flower comes out. The leaves are crunchy and sweet and delicious. Unfortunately, after it blooms, they seem to acquire an aftertaste of some sort that's not that pleasant. So that's why I want to get the first ones that I see, so that it'll be good to eat.
You cook them or eat them raw?
I nibble them along the trail, eat them raw.
Okay.
Oh, well, are there any other questions? Last call for questions. Just unmute yourself and ask away if you have a question.
Randy, my name is Joni Weinrad. I'm a member of the Wilson County Master Gardeners.
Ah, yes.
And I guess you have spoken many years ago at our meetings.
Mm-hmm. I remember, yes.
Yes. How am I able to contact you for future meetings?
Well, you can email me at randy.hedgepath@tn.gov.
At what?
TN. Like
EN? Okay.
.gov.
GOV. Perfect. We'd love to. You're very entertaining, and I'm sure our group would love it.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Well, I am going to say thank you, Randy, for an excellent talk.
Thank you.
Makes me want to head out into the woods tomorrow morning and see what I can see.
Well, that sounds like a success, because what naturalists try to do is inspire you to want to learn more and get out there and see the real thing. So I'm glad I was successful tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.